We're entering into spring. We're definitely having some March Madness with a 16 knocking out a one and then proceeding to lose right after that. And of course, my Marquette Golden Eagles made it past the first round, but did not make it past the second round. Michigan State took them out and all in that space. Some sad news for those folks that are rooting for Marquette like I was, but all right. They are a young team, and hopefully they will bounce back next year. They definitely have the core. Looks like it's coming back, and all in that way. So it should be another strong run, and we'll see who the champions are in this particular year. But that is just some of the things that are going on in the world that I thought of immediately. And of course, a lot of people are paying attention to Chat GPT and what it's doing. And of course, a lot of people are paying attention to the fact that Putin and Xi Jinping had a meeting. Xi was promoting China as a peacemaker on his first trip to Russia since the Ukraine invasion. So that is what he is saying. And definitely he's trying to find some way, I guess, to be a peacemaker. And we're going to see what Shaquille has to say about that, as well as what Shaquille has to say about a climate issue that apparently is going on in his home area of Australia. Because as I'm looking at some of the news from around the world, I see that millions of dead fish have been found in an Australian river due to low oxygen levels. So that is what they are saying. And Russia, apparently, getting off of that topic, is defying Putin's arrest warrant by opening its own case against the ICC. So I guess it's one of those tit for tat kind of things in that space. And Australia's in the news for another reason as well. A former Australian soldier has been arrested for alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. So it looks like Shaquille's area has made the news on a couple of fronts, and Israel soars to fourth place in the global happiness list. That's right. If you want to be happy, apparently you got to move to Israel because it is now one of the world's happiest countries, even though Finland has declared the happiest country for the sixth time in a row. And I'm going to find out if Shaquille has been to any of those countries. I'm sure he has been because he gets traveling the world. And we're going to find out very shortly where he's at right now. And, Chris Greco's least favorite place, that being France. France's Macron faces a no confidence vote as protesters are arrested. And of course, there are strikes at refineries and things along those lines. So that is some of the things that I am seeing in the news. Of course, we're going to hear about some more news that is going on, including some news from Africa, because apparently there are 43,000 estimated dead in Somalia drought last year. So who knows what those numbers will look like in this year, because that's what they were estimating from last year. And spring equinox 2023, ancient tradition of renewal, echoes into the modern world. So we're going to see if we get some renewal and maybe some positive news in that space. And speaking of, as I did earlier, China and that trip that they had to Russia, apparently the former Taiwan president, Ma, is open to meeting leaders on a landmark China trip. So I guess he's going to be opening those conversations as well. And over in South America, Colombia is suspending its ceasefire with the drug cartel, and an earthquake has hit Ecuador and Peru, causing widespread damage. So those are some of the things that we're seeing. And of course, we're also seeing discontent in Africa as anti-government protests are taking place in Kenya and Tunisia. And South Africa has arrested 87 before a massive anti-government protest. Some of the things that we are seeing over there in the African continent. And I know that actually that is one of the places that Shaquille just recently came from. So we're going to hear what he's got to say about that and all in that space. I will mention two other things in the news that I see, which is that Thailand is dissolving its parliament for its crunch election in May. And Croatia has detonated a massive NASA-era ship mine found buried in a seabed. But we're going to get to a lot of these stories and other stories as well. I'm going to bring in Shaquille since he's over there in Maldives and all in that space. So, Shaquille, how are you doing? How are these things going over there in Maldives? You're the world traveler. And if you're over there having food and all of that, and just having a good old time in that land and all in that space.
I wasn't quite expecting you to bring me on to that moment, so maybe just drop me backstage and I'll give him a thumbs up when I'm ready.
All right, I'll give him a thumbs up when he's ready. Sorry about that. We'll bring in Lee Newton Rhodes, who isn't traveling around the world, but is a presidential candidate. So, Lee, what is your thoughts about some of the things that are going on in the world? I just mentioned a couple that I had found immediately and all in that space. I could also say that Russia and Ukraine have extended their wartime deal on grain exports as global food prices still soar. So apparently they have agreed to that, and that is what is going on in that space. And I know we had those Nigerians in not that long ago, and the Lagos governor was reelected in a win for Nigeria's ruling party. So I don't know that those folks that we had would be highly happy about that, but they're also saying, guess what? There were irregularities in an election. So voting irregularities are being accused of in the Nigerian gubernatorial election as well. So I guess that happens not just.
Mark, why is that? Why is everyone allowed to question elections except Americans?
Well, I know we question elections as well, but
well, no, if you questioned the elections in 2020, you got censored, you got booted, you got kicked off, and the media didn't even go there. The mainstream media, they didn't even go there.
You don't think
they came out day one, most secure election in history, based on what? No evidence whatsoever. Mr. Magoo knew more than they did.
Well, I mean, you know, you will have some people that would argue that that's not the first time that happened. What about the Chads, those infamous Chads that?
Yeah, that's exactly the point. With the Chads, people question the elections, and they had a right to, and they had reason to. But this time, you weren't allowed to ask anything. Yeah, I just find it shocking. And there's one thing you failed to mention. Yes or no? Do we see an indictment coming to New York City or not for Mr. Trump?
Well, you know, the other thing I'm hearing is that it looks like there could be an indictment. If there's an indictment, some friends of mine have asked, if there's an indictment, can he still run for office? And we do know that we do have that candidate that is running from a jail cell. That is namely Tiger King. And the Tiger King is
you have to remember, though, also, an indictment does not mean a conviction. So even if we want to go there, we're not even there yet anyways. You can indict anyone of anything.
We're not there, but I'm still trying to figure out, and some friends of mine were trying to figure out the same thing. I thought that the rules said that you had to be a certain age. You couldn't be certain other things in the nature. And I thought one of those things was a felon. So how you are running.
I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is those are things for impeaching a president. So it's not necessarily doesn't mean prevents them from running, but they can, the misdemeanors and all those other high crimes and misdemeanors. That's once a sitting president in order to remove them and to prevent them from running. I'm not sure that applies.
So technically speaking, the Tiger King or any other body that's sitting in jail, the guy that was part of MOVE could be running for president, or anybody else that was maybe one of the Proud Boys could be running for president if they have been convicted.
I think so. Didn't we have a mayor? Was it Marion Barry a number of years ago who ran for mayor in Washington, D.C.?
I think he ran and I think he won. And that was
I think he won also.
That was after his crack conviction. So that
right, exactly.
That is very much the case, and all in that space. So yeah, you might be right in that area. I'm going to see if Shaquille is ready. Also going to bring in Sasha as well, and we've also got Steve. And actually, we're going to bring in Steve first. And it looks like Sasha has bounced off and all in that space. Hey Sasha, I'm bringing in Sasha, but then I do have a question for Steve. Hey Steve, what are your thoughts about? Because the other story I was going to get to, the whole notion of there's a whole bunch of countries thinking about things you can or can't do that are like saying, hey, wait a minute, you can't have TikTok. And I know that there are certain people even on this network that are big fans of TikTok if you are working for the government. So the BBC has urged its staffs to delete TikTok from company devices. I think there have been several countries, including the European Union, those fine folks over there where Sashi is in Canada, now the United States, and a number of others that are saying that if you are a government employer, you cannot have TikTok on your phone and everything. So what's your thoughts about this? Is this something that you had to get rid of? Were you doing a lot of TikTok stuff? Steve?
Well, no, it's funny you mentioned that. Guys, I'll be doing my monologue tomorrow because I've been literally today actually wearing my Star Wars shirt because I met a U.S. congressman, one of my best friends, Wiley Nickel, and we're both Star Wars fans. So how cool is that to meet a congressman and talk about Mandalorian and Star Wars and personal stuff, just a coffee with a croissant. And Wiley's going to try to come back on the show in a few weeks. But let me answer your question and begin with, and I'm going to begin my monologue next week with a very exciting meeting I had with Senator Mark Warner, who I met in a Welcome to the Triangle for a fireside chat with just 8 business leaders on Friday, St. Patrick's Day. And one of the topics of that meeting was TikTok. And I can't really talk about it because some of the stuff he was giving us was very private information from a U.S. senator because he chairs the Intelligence Committee. He's also was able to talk about Ukraine and different things. But it did come up during the conversation that I think most of us in the room agreed that there has to be some kind of ban of TikTok because of how it could be misused for for cyber attacks. And I know that Biden had an executive order, but even our governor of North Carolina has done an executive order banning TikTok on state devices. So TikTok can be used for positive ways. My own son, Ryan, during the COVID pandemic, got 400,000 followers on TikTok, training people on how to do art. And the radio actually interviewed him. So it can be used as a way to spread your message. But to answer your question, I think it is concerning. And with everything going on with China and the security concerns we have there, I think all things are on the table about, being very careful with what we're
I'm sorry,
doing.
Steve, what is it about TikTok that's unique as opposed to any other social media platform?
Lee, I don't really use TikTok that much. I've actually been meaning to get with my son to ask him, but I think it's just smaller videos that you just, and it's more video based, right? So there's not a lot of text or whatever, and you just put that out there. Jeff Jackson, a U.S. congressman, has done a TikTok video on the SVB bank bailout, and he received 1.2 million views in one day. A U.S. congressman who's probably going to run for attorney general. So it's a great way to get the message out quickly. And Mark, I don't know why. What is the difference between TikTok and, like Lee said, other platforms?
I mean, that's a good question. And there are some people that want to target Instagram and Facebook and a number of other ones as well. It is very popular, like you said, because of the video aspect and a lot of the quickness. And there are definitely some serious videos on there as well as some very silly videos as in that space. So I don't know why they are targeting it more than they would be targeting any of the other ones that are there in that space. So that is a good question. I'm going to see if Shaquille gives me the thumbs up that he's ready to go or not. And I don't want to bring him in if he's not ready. So I'll wait for the thumbs up and all in that space. I will bring in Dan Worth, and then maybe he's got some thoughts about TikTok and all in that kind of way and all in that kind of space. But I did have a question for Sasha really quickly, because I did see that there was a part of the world that is having a presidential race. And I want to say historically, this part of the world has been very much a socialist part of the landscape and all in that way. But it looks like that the socialists might be losing, because I don't know enough about Montenegro, but I do see that their veteran president will face a runoff on April 2nd against a pro-Western former economy minister after no candidate secured a 50% majority in a first round election on Sunday. So, as my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that in the past, Montenegro has definitely gone more toward the socialistic side. But maybe this is another case of one of those countries that might be breaking off from that kind of control. So, I was just wondering if I am correct that in the past, Montenegro has been more of a socialist country, and now it might be moving more toward the Western style of politics. Or am I totally wrong?
Mark, you never stop to amaze me. So in everything what's happening in the world, in Ukraine and so on, you are talking about whether Montenegro is a socialist country or not so socialist country, or maybe not at all socialist country. With all due respect, who cares? Can you tell me?
Really?
Well,
Really?
I mean, the country relies.
I wonder if they have TikTok
The
or if they
country
banned
relies
TikTok.
on Adriatic terrorism, and it did join NATO in 2017. Apparently, Finland and some other countries are thinking about joining NATO as well, and that was after a botched coup attempt. So the government blamed on Russian agents and Serbian nationalists. So Moscow dismissed the claim as absurd. I think Moscow dismissed some of the Ukrainian thing as absurd as well. So it sounds like they might be allies.
Hey, bring Shaq in. Bring Shaq in. He wants in.
Okay, I'll bring Shaq in. Gladly bring Shaq in.
Sorry,
Hey,
the
Jack.
lighting's a little bit The lighting's a little bit average because the sun's set, and I'm out here on the island.
So what do you think about this notion that maybe I didn't need to bring it up and everything, because definitely there was about what has gone on in Montenegro after Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. As a matter of fact, following that invasion, that's when Montenegro joined the EU sanctions against Moscow. So the Kremlin has placed Montenegro on its list of unfriendly states.
And therefore,
maybe they should be an ally of Ukraine, and maybe they need to be part of the discussion. Like I said, it wasn't in the Reuters that I found that story and everything, so it wasn't just me that brought it up as well. But I'll take your point, and I was going to get to some other things, including the EU seeking to provide 1 million artillery shells to Ukraine. So definitely that is in the news. And first thing I mentioned was this whole meeting with Xi and Putin and everything, and definitely folks can jump on that as well.
Hey, real quickly, we have, because I leave in about 5 minutes. Sasha, any update for us on Ukraine, Russia?
I think Ukraine hasn't done so well in the last 2 days because several days, if not weeks, Ukrainians were killing at least 1,000 Russians or more. In the last 2 days, it was only 700 each day. So maybe they need more ammunition, maybe they lack shells, artillery shells, or so on, because obviously I figured out if they would do just 1,000 a day, so 356 or 365,000 annualized. Okay, now we are talking about some production numbers, so they should keep on that level. Right now, Russia is busy with Chairman Xi or Emperor Xi, whatever you want to call him. Interesting what will result out of their talks. Obviously, Putin needs ammunition and weapons from China. And it's a big question whether China will dare to supply war criminals with more weapons to fight.
Yeah, and I'll be talking about. Yeah, I'm going to be opening up my monologue with that tomorrow.
Sasha, when you say would China dare, forget about the morals of it. If we just leave that aside for a moment, why, if they thought it was in their interest for whatever reason, why not? Who's going to stop them?
I don't think that anybody is about to stop them. It's just the optics of that are not really great with the indictment of Mr. Putin. And so see...
But, we in the West are so reliant on China that really the optics is, who cares? I mean, that's pretty much been US foreign policy for decades. The US has done all sorts of things that have not made them look great, but because the US has been so powerful, the rest of the world just has to suck it up.
Well, the question is China so powerful? Is China so powerful that they can dismiss US interests and just do whatever they feel like?
Pretty much.
And this is important. Before I leave the show today, I think this is an important conversation. First of all, the other news we want to talk about this week is the Silicon Valley Bank bailout, but now Credit Suisse, which employs 50,000 people in the world, but many here in North Carolina, looking at projecting significant layoffs in the next few days, which is not in the area.
Well, let's hold up. Hang on. Let's hold up a second here, Steve. So, Credit Suisse, although it's going to have an effect on the whole world, is really a Swiss and German problem.
Sorry,
but let me just ask you a question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Why are people in America now worried about layoffs? This is the plan, right? We talked about this last year. This is the plan. The plan is we're going to crush demand. We're not going to increase supply. We're going to crush demand. The plan is to make sure that the unemployment rate skyrockets. So, if you're complaining about layoffs, that's the current plan put forward by the Fed and the Treasury. That's their plan for dealing with inflation. So brace yourself, because there's a whole heap of pain coming your way. And it's not by mistake. It's not because of an economic cycle. It's by design. They are deliberately doing this.
But
Yeah.
They're not even
is
making a secret about it. They
is-
said this last year that this is what they were planning on doing.
But what I want to know is the rise of interest rates responsible for this banking crisis?
Yes.
The intent, that's why they're doing it.
That's
You know,
what they're
Jerome
doing it
Powell-
for, Steve. That's the
Jerome
economics.
Jerome Powell actually went in front of an open markets committee, I believe it was, and
That's an
said the
amazing
financial
clip,
sector
Sakil.
was fine. The financial sector was fine. There was no issues with interest rates increasing. There was no evidence that was going to cause any problems. And 3 days later, the bank collapsed. This Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. So why would we listen to them? They know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to assure people that there isn't a problem so that they can cause a maximum amount of pain in order to decrease demand. As I said, this is what they've said. This is not me like coming up with something random. This is what they said they're going to do, and now they're doing it.
Hey,
Yeah,
Shaquille,
and then you got Janet Yellen speaking out of both sides of her
My
mouth.
last point, because I got to go. My last point, but it's going to be our conversation for tomorrow's show, and I look forward to being here tomorrow. Real quickly, I think it's important for us to look at United States foreign policy holistically, right? And Fareed Zakaria spoke yesterday on his show, but it was very interesting. He talked about kind of like how for many years the U.S. foreign policy was one that engaged with our adversaries, but did so in a way where we were able to make sure that the relationship that we had with those countries was stronger than the relationship that other countries had with themselves. So the example would be, we had the Cold War, we had detente with Russia. We talked about Bismarck and what Bismarck did many, many years ago to help with Germany. And it was called the Bismarckian strategy. And we're particularly with China, right? Where the relationship with Russia and China wasn't so good, but we eased relationships with Russia. We eased relationships with China. But now what's happened is the United States has lost control. We don't really control the alliances other countries are building among themselves,
but Sasha,
and the relationships with those countries are worse than they were.
but
And this
Steve,
is the problem.
Steve, along
And I'm
those
blaming both Trump and Biden for this.
no, but
because
Steve,
Trump-
along those same lines.
Well, Trump is strong, Biden's weak.
No, but
No,
along
but
those same
Biden has
lines.
followed, but all the U.S. presidents. I tell you, the president that had the best foreign policy was Barack Obama, actually.
Oh my God.
Except for the Iran nuclear deal, he was actually doing that kind of Kissinger type diplomacy where he was engaging with allies.
Steve,
Hey,
what?
hey,
what-
Steve,
Guess what?
Steve, hold on a second, Steve. I am a big fan. Hold on a second, Steve. Hold on a second, Steve. I am a fan.
What Obama did about that? What did he say? Has he done anything at all when the part of European country was annexed by Russia? And it violated, by the way, the Budapest
I guess he didn't do everything right.
US and UK and
The
Russia.
bottom line is, U.S. foreign policy is messed up. I want to know whoever runs for president, whether it's Nikki Haley or whoever.
Arab Spring.
No, and I was going to mention the Arab Spring, and like I said, I am a fan of some of the policies of Barack Obama and everything, but even I am not the biggest fan of his military, because even some of the drone attacks were totally crazy and everything, and that was under the Barack
Wall Street riots. Barack Obama, community organizer.
Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
But
And
today,
I
the
know
United
about a
States
lot of
foreign
things.
policy, I got to run, but today the
Obama.
United States foreign policy is
Works
messed
on
up.
to this day.
BLM, Barack Obama. BLM
BLM actually
Barack
came
Obama.
later than Barack.
Oh no, but his people were involved in it.
That's
No,
up
listen,
for
Barack
debate.
Obama was indeed, he was a brilliant speaker, and he was great opportunist. He could engineer how to jump from nothing, complete obscurity, to a president of the United States and be re-elected, by the way. So this is absolutely world record for any country. Community organizer next year, a president of the United States. I never seen anything like this.
Wait a minute. Wouldn't some people say the same thing about Zelensky? Because Zelensky was a entertainer, kind of like some of the other people, including
Well,
Reagan.
he was not an entertainer.
X-rated,
He was
X-rated entertainer.
Okay, let me explain to you something. He was one of
Gay
the most
entertainer.
successful showmen in Europe. He amassed a great fortune for his television production, which he owned, by the way, and his net worth in hundreds of millions of dollars. At that time, before he became president,
buck naked.
But it's the same. Well, what do you want to tell me about him being entertainer? Ronald Reagan was entertainer. He was a movie actor.
Oh, I know, but have you seen some of the Zelensky's productions?
I don't think so. I think Zelensky financially did much better than Ronald Reagan. Or, by the way,
he danced around on the stage naked with a bunch of other gay guys.
Well, maybe that's what he did. Well, I haven't seen the movie either, but I do have a question that was based on something that Shaquille asked.
I don't know how artful that was.
That Shaquille asked earlier, because we're talking about the power and the might of China and North Korea. You know that this weekend there were actually 800,000 folks actually in North Korea that said that they would join the army in a single day to fight the United States. So that's 800,000 in North Korea. I'd hate to say
Mark, in fairness, how many volunteered?
Sign them up.
How many of those are volunteers versus forced to?
Well, they said that they were. That's what their state-run media claimed on Saturday, and I imagine that quite a few of them were probably, urged in a not so polite way to do that, because they said that they were students and workers and all in that space. So they're both students and workers. But my question is, if that's what's happening in North Korea, which is a smaller nation than China, and China's got like billions of people and everything, how many of those will we be willing to deal with their signing up and fighting us if they were to decide to do that and everything? And by the way, I'm going to throw this one to Sasha as I'm thinking about that. And if y'all have any response, let me know. But a Ukrainian soldier fighting in Bakhmut told the New York Times that his unit has been wondering something about the Russia's infamous Wagner Group, because he's convinced, and I can't see why he wouldn't be convinced, that they're on drugs. Because he says that while there's no evidence of that, it's not the first time Ukrainians have wondered aloud that the behavior of some Russian soldiers could be medically induced. Because I know you oftentimes talk about the meat grinder and all of that, and the Wagner Group is definitely doing this. So some people are like wondering how you can even go into this war if you know that you're going to die. Because apparently a retired U.S. Marine estimated the average life expectancy of a Wagner soldier on the front lines in eastern Ukraine is 4 hours. So if you go there, you're on the front line, you're going to be dead in 4 hours. Apparently that's what they're thinking and everything. So there are some folks that are wondering, these folks have got to be on drugs if they're going to do this and everything. Because one Ukrainian soldier said in February that the advance in Russian forces looked like a zombie movie as they climbed over the corpses of their friends. And I do know some people that are very much into that whole zombie space. So are they all drugged out on vodka and drugs? So is that what's going on?
By the way, 4 hours, it's only for few lucky ones. Most of the time will be less than 2 hours. It's evident from many sources that they are taking drugs, narcotics, they're drinking, they're just doing anything to motivate them to go ahead. And it is a giant meat grinder.
Have a good day, guys. See you
yes,
tomorrow.
It does. Thank you, Steve. Bye-bye. So this meat grinder is working 24 hours a day. And one of the reasons why Ukrainians are not leaving Bakhmut, because it's really nothing. But strategically, it's wedged there. So once Ukrainian will go into attack, that will be very helpful, because that will not be able to allow Russians to create some kind of a front line, because Bakhmut is right in the middle of that. If you would see the map, you would understand what I'm talking about. So they're holding. And another thing is that this meat grinder is working successfully well. It kills last 2 days 700 people a day, but before at least 1,000, 1,040, 1,070, 1,065 or so on. Their daily information how many Russians were killed, most of them in Bakhmut, of course. I hope I answered your question, Mark.
You did answer the question. So it does sound like they are definitely in that whole drug space, and they're just going out there and taking themselves to death and all in that space. I was going to get back to China, because I know that there's another part of the world that had some controversy, and there were some people that loved their foreign minister and loved their past president. There were others that were not the biggest fan of the past leader of New Zealand, but apparently the New Zealand foreign minister is going to meet their Chinese counterpart in Beijing. So is New Zealand going to be a Western nation that is going to help the folks over there in China and all in that space? Because I do know that there were some folks, including the folks on this network, that were not the biggest fans of the past leader of New Zealand and all in that space. But what's going on with New Zealand and the attempts to head over to China to alleviate some of the conversations and maybe get some support from China for their crisis? Because I'm sure they've got an economic crisis as well. Seems like there's economic crises all over the world.
Hey, Mark,
Can you bring up Shaquille for a minute, please?
Yeah.
Bring Shaquille.
I'm going to bring up Shaquille because I know Shaquille's got some thoughts about New Zealand and China.
Oh yeah, I've got some thoughts about New Zealand. I am on holiday, so internet connection's a bit dodgy. So just keep an eye
windy out there.
Look, it's not that I don't hate Jacinda Ardern, but just like Laurie Lightfoot, she's going to turn around and suggest that it's because she's a woman that that politics has just been so difficult, etc. No. The reason that things haven't worked out so well is because the policies have been shit. That's the reason it hasn't worked out so well. Okay? New Zealand economy is not doing great. And then she wants to attack Australia because of some climate change thing, because she wants to suck up to Trudeau and she wants to suck up to the political left in the world. And she prefer to do that than to act in the best interest of New Zealand. And that's how she acted when she was the opposition leader. So, if she wants to go out there and try and make some sort of deal with China, New Zealand's a sovereign country, they can do what they like. But don't expect your other allies, like Australia, to support it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I thought she was gone.
She is gone.
And why the hell?
She is gone. And I tend to think the Labor Party will probably lose New Zealand at the upcoming election. But you've had COVID restrictions that were absurd. You had one case in the North Island, so they shut down the South Island. How does that make sense? You've got a policy right now that says we're going to restrict foreign investment into New Zealand in order to make house prices more accessible. Why don't you just give grants to young people so that they can get into the property market rather than having the property market slide? I've got family in New Zealand. In fact, most of my family lives in New Zealand. The property market's sliding. In a lot of areas, the property market's gone down. Why is that a good idea? Someone has to explain to me why that's a good idea, because I don't get it. And then she turns around and has the audacity to suggest that it's not because of those policies that she hasn't become popular. It's because she's a woman. Give me a break.
It'll be interesting to see. We got to get some more women on here to address that and all in that space. We did have some last week and everything. I did see that Australia.
Why do we look? I encourage women to come onto these shows, but why do we need a woman? What's a woman going to say? No, Shaquille, you're wrong. You're wrong. People would have loved to see their retirement accounts go down and their real estate prices go down. They would have loved to have had less money if only she was a man. Is that what a woman's going to say to me? Let's not bullshit each other. The policies were bad. They weren't popular. New Zealand is poorer as a result. That's why she's gone.
But there have been some people on this show, including, I think, one of the founders of this whole network that has made the argument, and I'm not saying that they're right because I haven't done enough studies to see that they're right, that women leaders have had a better track record than man leaders in that space. And they use the whole compassion conversation as to the reason that they've had better luck. And like I said, I know that there have been some women-run countries that have not done that well, but I want to say that even some of the African countries are women-led and they're doing quite well. I want to say that one of the countries you visited, it might even be Kenya or Uganda.
You can cherry pick. You can cherry pick whatever you like, Mark. The majority of the world lives in peace, right? And the majority of the world's run by men, so we're not all that bad. But you want to distill down very complicated issues to things like race and gender expression and all this sort of stuff. I'm not buying it. And I love Kimberly. I think she's a fantastic woman. If she has a different opinion, that's fine. She's entitled to it, but I don't agree.
Hey,
Kimberly, I know you're watching back there somewhere.
Yeah, I know.
It
doesn't matter. There are some good women leaders. Margaret Thatcher was a good female leader. I mean, there are some male leaders that are good. There's some male leaders that suck. There's some female leaders that suck. Barack Obama sucked. I mean, so, as well as he spoke, yeah, he spoke elegantly, but just listen to his words, right? That's all you had to do to figure out where his bread was buttered. So, I mean, it's like Lori Lightfoot. She was light it both in the feet and the head. This prime minister in New Zealand, an idiot, poor decisions, right? It doesn't mean that it's because she's a woman she was an airhead. It wasn't the fact she was a woman. It's the fact she was a socialist and an idiot. I mean, and so sex doesn't come into this at all. I mean, I don't know, except Camilla slept her way up. But I mean, we won't. She had a better plan than Monica Lewinsky. What can I say? I don't know. This is all relative, right?
Let's come back to Jacinda for a moment. When she was the opposition leader, she spent time on the floor criticising one of the political parties in Australia. Now, the party she was criticising is called the Liberal Party, which is, it's not really conservative, but it's the Conservative Party of Australia. Right? We have two major parties, the Liberals and the Labor Party. She is a member of the Labor Party in New Zealand. She spent time on the floor criticising the Australian Liberal Party. Why? If I criticise another country's politics, that's fine. I'm just a free citizen. I'm not a politician. If any of us do it, we're just normal citizens. But why would you, as a political leader in a country, representing your country, decide to interfere and criticise a particular political party? It would be wholly inappropriate if the Australian Prime Minister was to criticise the Republicans or the Democrats in the United States. Now, she did this on the floor, on the House floor. So she's actually taken up the time of the New Zealand taxpayer to do something, to bring up an issue that has nothing to do with New Zealand, that had nothing at all to do with the future of New Zealand, just because she wants to go on a gripe, to express some gripe about Australia.
And you're
What
saying
did that
that
have to
there
do with
are
New Zealand? And time again, her policies have been exactly that. They've been policies where it's not about what's in the interest of New Zealand. It's about whatever woke thing that she wants to be involved in.
and you're saying that there.
Not
Hold on a
everything that she
second.
did
Hold
was
on a
bad.
second.
She did accomplish a few things, but I think overall that her prime ministership was a failure, and I'm glad that she's gone.
But hold on a second. You're saying that that's a abnormal thing, and I want to say that I've heard definitely politicians on both the left and the right make statements about parts of the world that they are not directly involved with. Now, some cases they are strategic allies and things of that nature. So I get it if you're going to talk about Israel and things in that space, but they've definitely talked about the parts of the world that are not necessarily
But
strategically
we're not
allied.
talking about. I'm not talking about making comments in relation to developing countries or that sort of thing. Okay, let's look at the United States. You have a couple of issues which come up continually. Immigration is one of them at the moment. You have issues with healthcare. You have issues with your education system. You have issues with what the correct tax rate should be. You have issues in relation to gun rights. We as commentators can make comments about that, but if I was the representative of Australia or one of the Australian representatives, I would have absolutely no place whatsoever to, on behalf of Australia, represent a view about what America should do with its healthcare. That's none of my business. The United States is the country to determine what they're going to do in relation to their domestic politics. It is absolutely absurd for a political leader of another country to criticise one side of politics and not the other in another country, and not just some random country. We are New Zealand's closest ally. More money comes into New Zealand than from any other country. More tourism comes to New Zealand than any other country. Okay, so if you want to start criticising domestic Liberal Party policies, do so as a free citizen. Don't do it as a representative of New Zealand, as if you speak on behalf of all New Zealanders. That's absurd. It's insulting. It's offensive. She should never have done it. And as far as I'm concerned, that she did that when she was the opposition leader, and then when she became the prime minister, nothing changed. She continued to act that way.
But along those same lines, then we have people on both sides. I'm saying this both on the left and the right that will make criticism and will make arguments about people's choices of the way that they handle gender rights and a number of other things. So we've definitely done that in some of the third world countries. I'm sure that there are going to be some American leaders that are going to speak out about the Taliban leaders and their whole decree against nepotism. Probably because some of them are doing their own nepotism.
Okay, so once again, if you're talking about a human rights issue that government leaders are advocating for in relation to other governments, that is an entirely different argument. But let's look at the Roe v. Wade dispute that you guys have right now. Should the Australian Prime Minister come in and say, well, look, we actually set our abortion laws at this point in the pregnancy, so therefore America should do the same thing? That would be absurd. That's not a decision for Australia to make. It's a decision for you guys in America to make. And our Prime Minister should not be weighing in on a domestic political issue for you guys in America and doing so on behalf of this country, because this country is a diverse group of people with diverse views. She had absolutely no right whatsoever to criticize. I won't say she had no right. She shouldn't be holding herself out as a representative of New Zealand and then making comments that a very big percentage of New Zealand doesn't agree with. That's not the role of the Prime Minister. And what she should have been doing, instead of running around the world advocating for this woke bullshit, what she should have been doing was trying to create the best future for New Zealand for the majority of New Zealanders. And she didn't do that.
No, I hear that, and like I said, I don't know enough about New Zealand and everything, but I do have a question for this time for Lee and everything, because I think he's going to enjoy this question and all in that space. But I just kind of alluded to it. But apparently, the top Afghan Taliban leaders have issued a decree against nepotism. So they're saying that Taliban officials must sack sons given government jobs, and we do know that there are some nepotism that goes on in politics here in the U.S. Do we need a decree like that the Taliban is having in our own Western politics and all in that space? Because there's definitely some nepotism that goes on in various forms of government and everything. So I don't know, Lee, you might be putting
so Mark, you're asking Lee whether the Taliban should be inspirational to the US political system. I'm looking forward to your answer, Lee. This is going to be great.
Mark, I don't understand it, because any laws that we pass anyways, they're meaningless, in terms of finance, campaign financing and stuff. Look what's going on with the Biden family. The money that's flowing in through the Treasury Department finally now is exposing. It's all irrelevant. They just do what they want anyways. So you don't have your son or your daughter in an office. What's the difference as long as their bank account's getting lifted up?
Good point and everything. And some people would say the
Lee,
same thing about
are you trying to suggest that Hunter Biden's girlfriend, the wife of his brother, who was a grammar school teacher,
Heather,
was unqualified to receive funds from a Chinese energy company? Is that what you're trying to suggest?
Just as much as Hunter was as a world-class artist. Why does the media not care about this stuff? Why does Congress not care about this stuff?
Well,
there's no
how much digging have they been doing into the various Trump deals and everything?
Come on, Mark. They want to give Trump a parking ticket, or jaywalking ticket.
I'm talking about like the Sun and some of the others. I'm not talking about Donald. How much have they really dug in to Donald?
The only question is, who is Biden advocating for?
Yeah, but the Communist Chinese Party.
I'm going to tell you this.
Mark, I got a question for you. Mark, Shaquille, if we would want to put someone in the American government,
What's happening?
Yeah, he froze. I don't know what's going on with Lee and everything.
Who could
he might have froze.
ruin it quicker?
Let's discuss something else. What do you think? Is Donald Trump will be handcuffed this week or not?
No.
Sasha, I have to say to you, and look, we all know how you feel about Donald Trump. Just leave your own feelings aside for a minute. I have to say that if he is correct that he does get arrested, I don't think that that's a good play for the Democrats. I really think that would turn him into a political martyr. I think that would really invigorate his base a lot more. I think that he would actually spin that into something positive. So I think that him being arrested tomorrow I don't see that being a good political move for the Democrats. And they're talking about, having him in handcuffs and all that sort of stuff. Again, I don't think they would. But if they did, if they were to put handcuffs on him, do the perp walk, release mugshots off him, that sort of thing, I think that would be I think that would backfire on them. And I think that they're probably trying to do the calculation here, because that would be a really dangerous move. I would suggest.
Shekil, so you're not strong believer in the independent American justice? No?
Sorry, say that again, Sasha. I missed it.
You're not strong believer in the independent American justice. So you think that this court in New York, for example, is driven by Democrat. It's not an independent court, do you think?
Well, Sasha, what I'll say is I'm a very strong believer in the independent justice system in the United States. Unfortunately, I don't think that either side of politics, when it gets to this level, I don't think if you just happen to be a mainstream Republican, the Democrats are going to attack you. If you're a mainstream Democrat, Republicans will attack you. I don't think that'll be the case. However, I think if you're talking about an event at this level, at these highest levels of government, it's all going to be about politics. I don't think that you could expect there to be independence here. This is going to be political.
Shekil, so
that's not a criticism. That's just a reality. It's not just the United States. In any country, if you had an issue in Canada, it would become political.
Shekil, I'm not trying to argue your point. What I believe is that then you're painting a world in the United States where until certain point there is a justice system which is independent and fair, but going a little bit higher, then you're going into political, whether it's Democrat or Republican leaning system, and there is no more independent legal system in the United States.
Unfortunately, Sasha, I think that's what the evidence would show.
And that's fine.
I really do. And to prove that point, at the moment, and over the last few weeks, I've actually had congressional hearings about this, where they've talked about, the FBI going in and raiding the houses of right to life protesters, but doing nothing about right to healthcare or advocates of abortion protesters. You've had an inquiry about bias within the justice system. So, I think that's the unfortunate reality.
Shekil, we have a right to life person that is actually running for president as a felon. I've mentioned him a couple of times. The Tiger King put his hat in the ring last week, and he's been convicted. He's definitely convicted of trying to kill an animal rights activist and all in that space. And definitely he's put his hat in the ring because he's a star. And he says that he wants to make a country.
Mark, we're no longer the land of rule of law over here. It's a world of political will. DOJ's been opted years ago. They make decisions based on politics, not so much based on law anymore.
They've been making those.
Well, I mean, you've got prosecutorial discretion, all that sort of stuff. But look at what's happening with DA Gascon in Los Angeles County. I mean, that's all politics. The guy's not even a lawyer. Now, talking about lawyers, I'd like to introduce you to one of my business partners who's here in Tahiti, in the Maldives with me. He is a former international tax lawyer. He's a business partner of mine. This is Warren. Warren, take the hot seat.
Oh, hello.
Good evening, Warren. Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Warren.
Welcome. How are you all?
Hello.
Doing good. Glad to have you, Warren, and definitely glad to see you here and all in that space. Actually, I saw that. And Shekil would love this since I want to toss it to you since it was a case involving law and everything. But I did see that a former U.S. Marine Corps pilot was lured from China to Australia by security agencies before his arrest. So Daniel Dugan is facing extradition to the United States on charges of breaking U.S. law by training Chinese military pilots to land on aircraft carriers. So that was
let me ask a tax question to Warren. I won't tell you where Warren stands. He could be a socialist for you. I do have socialist friends.
Yes.
What do you think about the plan they have in the United States to tax unrealized gains? Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, the problem with taxes, years ago, I was named in the Panama Papers in Australia to do with all the kinds of offshore stuff, and ABC turned up at my house to interview me, and the first thing they said to me was they were fascinated because they assumed that I was really dodgy, but found nothing dodgy on me at all. But they said even though I was a cheeky bugger, in their words. But the second thing they said was, how do you feel about the fact you're helping Australians avoid their fair share of tax? And I said, well, that by tax planning for them. And I said to them, well, I said the day that Google, Facebook, and all of the wealthy start paying 25, 30% tax, then sure, let's have this conversation. But I said, the reality is right now that's not happening. So I said, I'll happily help people pay their legal fair share of taxes. So the problem with unrealised gains is that there's always going to be a way around the system. It just hurts the wrong people. That's how I see it.
Warren,
When the ABC
even if this is
came
not
to
way
your house
around it,
and asked you, when the ABC, let me just ask you a question. I want to follow up. When the ABC came to your house and asked you about the people paying their fair share, did you ask them what fair share actually is? Because at the moment in Australia, much like the United States, the rich pay it all. So what exactly do they mean by the fair share?
Well, that's what I said to them. It's just an arbitrary definition. You know, one group pays 40%, one group earns more money and pays 1%, and all the studies show that to be the case. So I tell people the more money you make, the less tax you pay.
A quick question for you, because it actually comes to one of our other favorite topics, and I know that Shaquille's gonna love me throwing this one out at you because it doesn't deal with race or rights. But those that love cryptocurrencies will say that one of the reasons they like it is because they can do all of their stuff offshore because of the whole offshore banking and all in that space. So what are your thoughts around that? Because I do know that a lot of people that are in that crypto space are also glad to do it because it is not regulated, and it is also a lot of money that is coming from offshore accounts.
Offshore accounts are very popular, but they're also being looked at by every major Western crime force, government task force, almost imaginable now. So I tell people, you don't really want to go down that path unless you're either A, willing to go live somewhere other than one of these high tax countries and genuinely make that your base, or number two, you've got an absolute truckload of cash to pay really good tax advisors and experts to set up properly, legally run international offices that are proper staff and everything. Because I said, otherwise, you pretty much see them as running a sham rubbery arrangement. So I said, really, unless you're willing to either leave the country, or the other option that's quite common is that if you actually are willing to be a philanthropist and genuinely do a lot of good, foundations is very popular, as the Clintons and various others have shown, you know. So, yeah.
I actually had an interesting conversation about it with a friend of mine about foundations, because we were trying to decide, or they were trying to decide, if they could set up a legal for-profit foundation, because every foundation that I'm aware of is nonprofit, but they want to do it as a for-profit entity. So is there any such thing as a for-profit foundation, and is it able to be run successfully? And if so, do you have to have like some major corporation behind you?
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Guys, where we are, where we are, we're actually at the communal place, because this was the only place where I had any light, and they're about to start the DJ. So I think our music's getting a bit loud, and we're struggling to hear you. So I'm going to bid you farewell, Warren. If you have anything,
lovely to meet you, everyone. Thanks very much for having me on, and nice to meet you all, even though briefly.
Well, can I just ask you a quick question?
You as well. Hopefully, Shaquille will bring you back on in the near future.
Let me
ask a quick question for Warren. Yeah. About these unrealized gains. Where are people supposed to get cash? How are they supposed to pay for unrealized gains if they don't sell the asset?
Well, that's the whole point. Yeah, it's a very good question, because if I had made a capital gain unrealized and then I'm totally being taxed on it, I mean, I'd have to sell the asset most likely, or borrow over it. So it's kind of a bit stunning for me. I mean, when I first was told that was being proposed, I said, don't be ridiculous. I said, why would any government do that?
Well, the question becomes, what happens if the asset price falls? Is the government then going to refund the taxes paid on the unrealized gain? And if that was the plan, can you imagine what a calamity that would be if, when the market turned down, the government all of a sudden had to pay out tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars?
It's hard to, it's a very good point. I 100% agree with you. I genuinely, and again, I just always put myself in a taxpayer's position. Let's say that I got an asset, but I bought for 400,000, it's now worth $1 million, and the government says, hey, you've made a 600,000 gain, you've got to pay, I don't know, 30% tax or 20% tax, 120 grand. I mean, maybe I'm lucky enough to have that money sitting in my cash. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I go, yikes, I'm going to have to either avoid it and hope I don't get caught and penalised, or I'm going to have to sell my asset or sell part of it. So, yeah, look, it's basically forcing people to sell assets.
What they're talking about, though, is they're talking about reducing the discount on capital gains and taxing unrealised capital gains when the assets transfer to the next inheritor. So Here's the question: if you don't give a capital gains discount on capital gains, and you've held an asset, let's say for 10 years. Now, okay, inflation's a little bit high now. It was lower before, but I think average inflation over the last sort of 50 years or so, it's averaged out at about 5%. So, accounting for inflation, if you don't actually give somebody a discount on their capital gain, they're not going to have made a gain. They're going to have made a loss in real money terms. How does this make sense if it's not going to account for inflation?
Look, I think I can't think much else than government's obviously a bit low on money. I think certainly the whole COVID thing and giving concessions and payouts just suddenly probably broke the budget a little bit, and they've got to get it back now. And I know in Australia.
I think, Warren, you're being far kinder than I am. I don't think the government's low on money. I think the government's low on IQ points.
Oh, you probably got a point there, but I always try and give some benefit of some doubt because I don't think everyone in government is a complete idiot. You know, I think there are some people who go in there and try to make a difference. But
let's be fair, right? The government doesn't give anybody, especially tax officers, which you used to work for, they don't give anyone the benefit of the doubt. They go in guns blazing to try and find what you did wrong. Why don't we treat the government and the bureaucrats exactly the same way, the same contempt they treat us with?
Yeah, well, I do know from my inside information in Australia that from what friends tell me that they're being pushed pretty hard to collect some taxes and get their revenues up a little bit higher because they weren't collecting any tax debts for 2 years in Australia when COVID was going on. So now we're in catch-up mode. So suddenly, I mean, anyone who owes us for anything in Australia is getting calls to the tax office. That's what and getting raided or whatever. So
we had a conversation in the pool yesterday where I said to you that I don't know of any business owners right now that don't currently have a tax problem or aren't currently being audited. That you said that most of the people that you know are in a similar position.
Yeah, it's pretty common. It's just
so go after the little guy and crush the little guy, and let the big companies get away with blue murder. Great.
Pretty much. Well, there's a study in 2016 in Australia in the Sydney Morning Herald in April 2016 by a journalist, by Peter Martin. And he studied the affairs of the 56 richest Australians. And I would do this as a bit of a trivial pursuit question to people. I say, guess how many were found to pay, to pay any tax? Guess how many of those 56 Australians actually paid tax at all? The answer is 2. 54 paid none. One paid $4,354. One paid $54,120 or something dollars. But here's the catch. On average, they paid $1.7 million per year to tax and financial advisors. Now, that in itself tells you how the system works.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense and everything.
Is that the issue that I have, Warren? I'm only spending $1 million a year on taxes. I should be spending more.
Yeah, you got to pay me. You got to pay me twice as much.
I've been underpaying.
You've been underpaying your advisor. That's the problem. That's the whole problem. You've been underpaying your advisor. Hey, Sasha, I know we're getting ready to wind down and everything, but I did have a quick question for you and everything. And
we're going to go, guys. Mark, thanks for the link for economics. See you guys.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Warren, nice to meet you.
Yeah, pleasure to meet both of you. One of the things I was going to ask you, Sasha, as we wind down is there's another part of the world that has always been at war with each other, but apparently they're in peace talks again. So Israel and Palestine are in peace talks. They have renewed vows to curb their violence and halt unilateral moves at their Egypt summit. So definitely they're saying that they're going to curb that rise in violence. But is this just more lip service? Or are we actually going to have a kind of peace talk that is going to actually be a successful peace talk in this case? Because ever since Israel was created, there's always been this battle between Israel, Palestine, and the various other countries in the Middle East. But apparently we're having another peace talk. So is this peace talk going to be more successful than
Mark,
the other?
I just want you to back up for a second. Originally, when Israel was created in 1947, there was no Palestine as we know it today. There was Jordan, but there wasn't Palestine. Am I wrong?
I don't think there was a Palestine, but Palestine, well, that's a whole biblical conversation as to whether they're trying to create the original Palestine or whether there is a need for an independent Palestine state or a number of other things that we can get into a bigger debate later and everything. I just want to know if there's going to be peace. And Sasha has definitely studied a lot of things in the world and definitely knows a little bit about Israel. So, Sasha, are we going to get peace on this time around, or is this just going to be another one that'll be broken by one side or the other?
Okay, first of all, let me address Lee's question about Palestine.
Yes.
What is a Palestine? Its original word is Palestina. It's not an Arab word. It's not Middle Eastern word. Palestina was primarily a Greek. The country is the same, mind you, same what is today called Palestine or whatever it might be, and Palestina 2,000 years ago, the territory is the same. Different country, different people, different religions, different language. There is nothing in common, period. So essentially, when England was leaving its mandate over Palestina, because the name was still Palestina, coming back from 2,000 years ago, there was no country of Palestine. There was no nation of Palestine. They were all Arabs, same as living in Saudi Arabia, same as living in Egypt and many other places. And the mandate, what they were leaving, that there will be on that territory two independent countries. One is Israel, one is Palestine. Okay, so Israel actually fulfilled its mandate. It's created independent country. Now the Palestine never did so, because what they were complaining is that they want Israel is thrown away to the sea, and then on the common territories, they will build some kind of a country, some kind of a government, and so on. Now, that never happened. There were 6 wars, if I'm not mistaken. And all of them,
that's right,
yeah, all of them, Israel won, one way or another. So now the situation is this, the Palestinians, they can live in peace with Israel. There is no problem at all. In fact, Israel could help them a big time. But they have a few radicals who are being paid money to do the terrorist acts and to destroy any kind of peace that could be there. And unless Palestine people will understand that and will stop housing them, because a lot of Palestinians are being killed.
I'm sorry, Sasha, is it the people or is it the government?
Oh, it's the people. People must say enough is enough. We want to be in peace with Israel. We want to build our own country and so on. Hell with you, terrorists, out. Peace instantly. There is no problem.
Sasha, is there not an Israeli terrorist group as well? Because some people would say that is part of what Zionism is. I'm not saying it is.
Mark, stop it.
Come on. Mark, you don't see Israelis blowing up pizza shops in Gaza. You don't see them blowing up kindergartens. You don't see them blowing up school buses. You don't see that. You see, unfortunately, children being killed when they use them in shields or accidentally, but not intentionally, and not by random citizens of Israel. You don't see that.
Majority of the Palestinians,
I will bring on some people that make arguments that are Palestinians. They would make arguments against that. They would, and actually, I did interview one guy that has a like a area to educate people on both sides and everything. So he.
And Mark, you don't have the schools in Israel, educating these kids, if you want to call it educating, how to blow up the other side. You don't do that. But you see that in Gaza. You see the hatred.
And there is some conversation as to whether
you see streets named after terrorists. You see terrorists paid, their families paid after they're blown up for these suicide bombers to reward these families.
There are some people that would say that there is radical aspects of Israel as well, and I'm not saying that there are not severe radical aspects of Palestine
Mark, I got a solution. Go strap a bomb to your ass and go bomb somebody if you advocate that. It's stupid.
No, I'm not going to do that. But there are people that have the right to do that as well. And
they have a right to do it.
And I'm saying there are people on the right, as in the right.
On the right. He said on the right.
Huh?
Yeah. Wait, Mark, what you're saying is there are whack jobs on both sides, and I'll grant that.
I'm saying.
But it's not the country, it's not the system, it's not the educational system, it's not the vast majority of people. Israel doesn't name streets after terrorists.
I don't think it's the vast majority of Palestinians, which is what Sasha just said. I don't think it's the vast majority of Palestinians. I also don't think it's the vast majority of Israelis.
But it's a top down, Mark. It's a top down in the Palestinians.
They should kick the bums out. Send them over to Jordan or over to Iran. Get them out of the Palestinian area. They're just probably
I would say they've kicked some of the bumps out of Israel that are radicals as well. But I do think that there are some radicals
in Israel. Mark, can you tell me who are the radicals in Israel, and can you name any terrorist act that they have committed anywhere?
Off the top of my head, no, but if I was to talk to one of my good
Thank
friends
you.
from the
Mark,
PLO,
do
I
you
could,
know,
yeah, I could give you
okay,
several folks that would
Mark,
give you
do you
examples.
know
You asked me specific.
do you know
That's
the
like asking, do I
math?
know members of the ANC?
Okay,
But I don't know any
Mark,
members of the
here's
ANC,
a
but
math
I
class in
support some of what the
Palestine.
ANC did.
A math class in
Yeah.
Palestine. The teacher says, okay, children, here's a problem you have to solve. Muhammad in the morning killed 2 Israelis, and in the afternoon he killed 3 Israelis. How many Israelis Muhammad has killed during the day? And children have to figure out. So it's kind of an innocent exercise. So 2 plus 3 will be 5. But there is a huge political connotations that instills in children the belief that Muhammad is the right guy. Muhammad killed 2 people in the afternoon, and then 3 people in the evening. So let's be like Muhammad. He's a great guy. Any comments?
As if there are not extremists on the Christian side, the Hindu side, and a number of other sides as well. So there have been terrorists and kind of radicals in that side with a lot of warped thoughts in the past. I mean, let's look at the Christian
and you started with the idea that there must be some kind of a peace between Israel and Palestine. So how you can make a peace with a country that it teaches its kids to terrorists right from the first grade when they're 6, 7 years old?
Mark, can we respond to something Sasha said? Sasha brought up an expression, from the river to the sea. What does that mean, Mark?
From the river to the sea? I mean,
yeah, what does that mean?
Well, it depends. If you're talking about the radical view, that means that they want the entire captivity of the whole area and everything. But they
don't want Israel to exist.
Well, there are some that would definitely agree that you can have a coexistence between the two and everything.
It's not what Iranians want. Iranians want Israel to cease to exist. And Hezbollah, which is the right hand of Iran, and they're very active in Palestine and many other territories over there, they are of exactly the same kind.
Criminals.
So the goal of these people is to cease Israel to exist. Okay, how you
and there are some people on Israel that would love to see every just like you have talked about every Russian disappearing. There are some people on Israel that would like to not have a person that existed in that is of Palestinian descent and everything. And I know
Mark,
that
I don't think that's right.
I'll tell you, you are too intelligent person to believe in what you just said.
Yeah, that's just naive. 97%.
Naive. That's what I've heard. I've heard people say that
97% of the Palestinians coexist in peace with Israel and like it that way. And Israel, they're brothers. I mean, they're from the same.
Dan, and when asked what government they would rather live under the Palestinian or the Israeli, they choose the Israeli.
Yeah, and it's because it's more stable, and it's more fair, and that's exactly why. Okay, so they're all children of Abraham, and they know that. And for the most part, they want to coexist. They want to have peace. It's a few crazies that don't. And they're funded by Iran and others that have a political agenda. And so I don't know how you can even possibly support, and you sound like you're supporting this. I don't understand.
No, I'm not supporting Hamas and the terrorist group. I'm supporting the right for a Palestinian free state, and I've always supported the right for a Palestinian free state.
Who doesn't allow them to have a state? They could have a state since 1947, 48.
They can do whatever they want.
So almost 100 years, they can have their own state, and they don't. Because
Mark, what are they doing with Gaza?
Huh? That's the radical side of everything. Oh, sorry. Were you trying to come back in, Shaquille? Shaquille was not trying to come back in. But
are we over
that's
time?
The radical side of what's going on.
We're out of time.
Yeah,
I think we're a little over time today.
Show, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes, Mark, I really wonder about some of your views. I mean,
I wonder about some of your views, Dan, but that's a whole other conversation. So we'll get into that.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, if you're promoting radicalism and terrorism, then
I do not promote radicalism and terrorism, but I also think that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, because there have been times.
Mark, you said this already 250 times, and you know what? This and 75 cents will buy you a cup of coffee. That's all what there is to you.
A banana.
Not anymore. You need more money. 75 cents
I
doesn't make that cost
need more
anymore.
money, and I can use that phrase if I want to. But
$2
we'll get
now.
our economics money.
$3.50.
I got to hold on a second. I did not hit the button. Hold on. Don't go anywhere.